Hello, everyone. I am super excited today. This is a very unique opportunity that is quite different than something I've ever done, quite candidly, and very different than any other podcast that I've hosted yet. And what we are going to do today is actually a one-on-one interview with my good friend, Todd B. Lieman. And Todd is actually with me in the office right now here in Boulder, Colorado. Welcome, Todd.
In person, baby.
In person. We almost had a live audience today, but the wives didn't want to come and be with us. So
let's not only throw them under the bus, or the kids.
Or the kids. Let's
throw them all under the bus.
We should.
Yeah.
We should. So again, Todd has been a great friend of mine. We just established last night, I think, for about 8 years now.
Yep.
We met through our boys, as a matter of fact, and a summer baseball camp, and it was love at first sight.
Kind of crazy how love at first sight it was, and so excited to walk into that place, meet you all, totally connect, and then have you tell us that you were moving away in that very moment. That was lovely.
I know. I'm sorry. But with all that being said, today, what we're about to do is go down this path. And Todd and I have not even talked about this really, but Todd is a marketing genius, a writer, an artist, and now a published author. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And Todd has just recently published his novel, Dinner at God's House. And this is really just a candid conversation about the book and your story and how that came to be. Does that sound like a plan?
It sounds like a plan. Let's do that.
Let's do it.
I have to push back on any genius label. I just stop it.
Well, with that being said, marketing background galore, which is obviously a creative artist in itself. But as you and I have been talking over the last couple of days, you've always been an artist. But this book is a work of art that now gives you another name in your title as a published author.
Yeah. And so what's interesting about that, I think, is that, first of all, I started this thing 25 years ago, as you and I discussed, and I've been so afraid of launching it and putting it out in the world. And doing so actually took away any need or any desire, any need, or even I guess need to have another name for what I do. And it actually just made me more me. And so, whether whether it's a marketer or an artist or a writer or whatever, all of those things are just labels that don't matter, that make it easier for someone else to understand maybe what I am or who I do, or they're just ways to describe something. But, launching this book was like, oh, now you're a published author. And it's like, well, no, I'm just closer to me than I've ever been, because I actually listened to myself and launched this thing out into the world and let it fly. And it was like, oh, there I am.
So that's very powerful. And yet I feel like we're starting at the end. And
well, yeah, but you started with all the labels, so I've gotta explain. You actually said this gives you another thing and to describe yourself, and it's actually one. It actually took away all the things that I have to describe myself.
Interesting. Well, that again, very, very powerful and insightful. And again, with the end in mind, one of the things that I've heard you say in the last couple of days of spending time with you this weekend has been, this freed you.
Yeah.
This took a weight off your shoulders because in a way, over the last 25 years that you have been working on this piece of art, you almost felt this sense of, well, I don't want to speak for you, but the sense that this was a requirement, that you needed to do this.
Yeah.
And until you completed it, it weighed you down.
Yeah, well, I also think that yes, it weighed me down because it was fear-based. So it was not about freedom. It was about fear. What if people hate it? What if the reviews are bad? What if it turns out that I actually suck as a writer? And that's what I mean. Like I called myself a writer, but this was how I really defined it. And what if I wasn't that label? Who was I then? And so I think the real reason this freed me is that it released me of so many of the narratives that are in this story about me going in and out of depression and trying to um, overcome that. And I should say that the book is fiction, but it's very much based on my experience, ripped from the headlines. And so I think that releasing the book in a way released me of all those old narratives, and I was no longer. It was very healing. It was really healing, and I struggle with the idea of healing because it sounds final, like, oh, I'm healed. And I think we go back. It's we ebb and flow, and there's just moments, as you and I have also discussed over the last couple of days. And but yeah, when it finally was out there, it opened a whole new portal to new experiences and new stories, and freed me from a lot of the old ones that kept myself locked up.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the book then. So you mentioned that it is fiction,
Yes.
but yet based on fact, possibly.
Yeah, it's based on real events, but as you know, a whole section of the book takes place in a place that in theory doesn't exist. So I haven't had that experience, so that by default makes it fiction.
Fair enough. So it is a novel, it is fiction, and yet the characters that are portrayed are you and people in your life
Yes.
that have used different names and sometimes different genders.
Yeah, yes, and some true names. The protagonist's name in the book is Eric. His best buddy is Tim. Tim exists.
Timmy. Chiseled Timmy.
Timmy, sorry, buddy, but isn't chiseled. But he is in remarkable shape, and he's not a surgeon, or at least the type of surgeon described in the book, but he's very much the experience of Timmy as described for the kind of person that he is, and his importance in my life is very, very real. But a lot of the other names were changed to protect the
innocent, as they say,
I guess. Some innocent, some maybe not.
So, as the title, Dinner at God's House, is this a story about heaven? Is this a story about depression? Is this a story about religion? Is this a story about...
Certainly not a story about religion. I think it's a story about trust, forgiveness, and love. I think this is a story about coming to grips with experiences in one's life and learning how to make peace with them, and framing them in a moment instead of consistently keeping them either part of the past or even part of the future, And I had some experiences in my life when I was younger that were traumatic, and they created a script that I followed for years. And this book allowed me to stop following that script.
Trust, forgiveness, and love. So you start, I believe, if I remember correctly, you start the book in Joshua Tree.
Correct.
Boy Scouts.
Yep.
Which is now Scouts,
Yes,
right?
right.
As my son is about to get his Eagle Scout.
Wow.
I figured you'd appreciate that.
I do.
But the idea of you on this rock cliff in Joshua Tree, fearing for your life
Yeah.
and worrying about death,
Yeah. Or at least thinking about it.
Thinking, right. That's actually a good correction and a good point. So one of the first times it sounds like in your life, was that around 7 years old?
No, that was, I mean, it's Boy Scouts. So I think I was 11,
11.
13. I think I decided I was 11.
Okay. 7 was, I believe, when your parents had the fight
right.
later on. Okay. In the story. So did this really happen?
Yes.
Okay. So this idea that you were
I was on a Boy Scout trip in Joshua Tree, and I was not a daredevil, and I let my troop go do their thing, and I went off on by myself and found myself sort of spread eagle on a wall without any idea how to get down, and I 1 minute was freaked out, and the next minute I was down. And I don't know how I got down. Logic would dictate that I blacked out, and that was the only way I could overcome the fear to get down. But I, for years have always kind of liked the idea that I was lifted off that rock and placed down.
And in the story, you basically say that you obviously didn't get injured,
No,
and you were down, and yet you really don't have any recollection of how.
No recollection of how.
But you talk about things that are fascinating to me in that experience with your amazing talent to have this frequency that connects you to the universe in a way that friends of yours and family didn't even understand.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about that and what that means and where that comes from.
I have no idea where it comes from. I always felt, I never felt like I belonged. I could fit in. I was a bit of a chameleon. I could have a conversation with just about anybody, about just about anything. But it was never really, I never really felt like it was me a lot of times. But I always felt this connection to something bigger, whether it was the universe or energy or whatever. Like in my private, quiet moments, I just knew that I was part of something bigger, and I didn't have the words for it. I didn't know how to describe it. And I felt weird as a result of it. And I felt like an outcast, on the outside looking in, no matter where I was, even in the middle of a party, talking to a million people, I didn't feel like I was there. My body was there, but like whoever it was that I was wholly was not there. WHO, not just HOLY. And I didn't know what it was, and I also pushed it away. I had therapists tell me I needed to be on meds, and I knew that wasn't the answer. But I was also afraid of having hard conversations with people. I was afraid of hurting someone's feelings. I was lying to myself. I was lying to other people because I just didn't understand what all of that meant. And I think that there's a lot of people that feel that way and experience that. I don't think that it's unique to me. I don't think it makes me special. I think that it's just this place that you can get to that's quiet, that finally, and again, that's how I was able to release the book and finally come to grips with the idea that this story isn't necessarily mine. It was the underlying sort of idea of it was delivered to me, and then it was my responsibility to build it out. And I was just afraid of that. And I think that's how all art kind of works. There's this idea floating around in the universe, and it picks someone and says, you're now going to go write this amazing song, and you have this responsibility to do it. And if you don't do it, it'll leave you and it'll go to someone else who can. And it's a profoundly powerful feeling if you can't accept it. I should say it's a profoundly powerful feeling to accept it, and it's a profoundly it makes you feel weird and wrong and strange if you're pushing it away. You don't understand why you were picked. And we talked about this a little bit, but this is the challenge that I have about any kind of criticism of any kind of art, because really what you have is someone who has had this experience that translates it into some form of art and puts it out there, and then it meshes with the frequency of the audience, or it doesn't mesh with the frequency of the audience. And that audience frequency is based on their own experiences and their own feelings and all of the different things that have happened in their life. And so if it connects, there's a connection. If it doesn't connect because, well, my energy and my experiences don't really understand the energy coming off of this piece of art, that's fine. But that doesn't make the piece of art bad. Like a lot of the criticism would be like, oh, these brushstrokes suck, or he can't write, or whatever. Like, it just didn't connect. And I think that's why, and I'm going in all kinds of circles here, I recognize that, but I think that's why everyone has this responsibility, if they feel some piece of art in them, to release it, whatever the art is, by the way, because every piece of art connects with someone. I think every song that has ever been written, someone's life has been saved by that song.
Wow. That's awesome.
Even Nickelback songs, which everybody rips on Nickelback, but there are huge fans of Nickelback, and there are people whose lives were saved because of Nickelback. And it's like, how can you sit there and rip that, knowing that there are people whose lives have been saved? Hip hop, Metallica, heavy metal, that like these, I know I have a friend whose life basically was saved by Metallica songs. And so it's so funny to me, or so interesting to me, that there are people who will rip on that. I hate hip hop. I hate country. It just doesn't, like, that artist's experience just doesn't vibe. That energy of it just doesn't land with yours, but there are other artists that it does. And so, we all have that piece in us. And I really think we all have a responsibility to release it.
Yeah. Well said. So
well said. You just rambled for 25 minutes, but dude, something in there was really good.
Powerful. I'm still chewing on it a little bit, but with all that being said, I know that part of the story is about battling depression.
Yes.
And suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
And maybe even suicidal tendencies. And I feel as though one of the things that you're saying is, you wrote this book not just for yourself to get the story out because you felt that it was your responsibility, but that this will connect with so many people. And whether it's the entire book, the entire story, or segments of the story, and the concept around, you talked about not fitting in and misfits, and you talk about being an outcast, right? And you felt that way in your own life in Boy Scouts growing up. And I feel like there's a lot of that underlying theme in your story.
Sure.
And yet once you realize that you have to accept who you are,
right,
and the acceptance of you, the rest of it just kind of fell into place.
Right. Well, I think, we learn about, in grammar, we learn about, the stop being a full sentence, because there's the you understood, stop is the verb, period. And I feel like the trust, forgive, love, it's trust yourself, forgive yourself, love yourself is sort of the understood part of that. An unspoken part of that. And I had to learn to do all of those things, especially forgive myself, because I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned to lie at a very young age to protect myself and the people around me. And it became really easy, which may be why I was really good at movie PR early in my career, saying that Navy SEALs was one of the best movies ever made. But I just dated myself. Holy cow. Google it, Navy SEALs. It's like 100 years old. But yeah, so it's all of this, and we've talked about this too. All of this is a lesson in how to figure out that, or to figure out that we as individuals, we have the whole universe we are the whole world. We have the whole universe. We have all of our answers. We have all of everything we need. Everything begins and ends with us. And if we take care of that, the rest of the world is somewhat taken care of, and if we can really focus on healing ourselves, and again, I use healing loosely, those around us sort of get permission to heal and take a look at themselves, and the circles get wider and wider and wider. And we only need to look at the world and the way the world is right now, and all the hate that's in the world, to understand how much hate is in people and how much hate they feel in themselves. Because when you have that, all you want to do is get that feeling out of you. So you have to put it on somebody else. And when you love yourself and you can forgive yourself and you can trust yourself, you don't hate anybody. You don't need to put it on anybody else. And so, I really just wish I could, dose the world with MDMA or something, so that they could take a big deep breath at them, a big deep look inside themselves, and heal that sort of that hate, and realize that they don't have to feel it inside themselves, and that they can forgive themselves for whatever it is, or forgive someone else for whatever it is, so that they don't have to hate. Like, hate ends with self-love and self-healing. There's no reason for it.
Yeah, lots to unpack there. Let me start with something, and then I want to get back to the MDMA. But let me start with something. In the book, you mentioned something about having a closet full of masks that helped you to create a void. And I'm paraphrasing, I know, but do you still have a closet full of masks, or has this allowed you to move beyond that, for lack of better terms?
So it's a great question. I think that I think I probably do still have a closet full of masks. I don't know that I put them on, as I don't wake up, go look at it, like looking for my pants to wear that day. But I am now much more aware of, I don't have to put that on. I'm reaching for it. I don't have to do that. I can stop myself. I'm not ashamed of myself, or afraid of myself, or scared of showing myself at like I was before, because I didn't think that I was worthy of love, or of anything. I just didn't think I was worthy. And so, I had a history of sabotaging any success that I was making, either physically, mentally, even creatively. I'd get in shape and find some way to remind myself that I suck and get out of shape. And that was, I gained and lost the same 30, 40, 50 pounds my whole life. The book has allowed me to lose it, and it's gone. It's the first. I always used to say that I didn't lose weight. I just misplaced it for a while, and I would find it. I really feel like this is the first time in my life that I've lost that 30 pounds, because I don't. so that mask is gone, right? So I think we all have them. I think that it's a very human thing. And what I don't do anymore is beat myself up when I reach for it. So I used to like reach for it, and it's like, you suck. You said that this mask was gone forever, and here it is. You suck. Go gain 30 pounds. Or just, not make good choices for myself, or whatever the things were. So I might have them still. I don't put them on as much.
Well, one thing you said to me before we even sat down today was that meditation has helped you to be more aware.
Yes.
And I'd like you to maybe talk more about that, because you do talk about meditation in the book.
Yeah.
And
so I read this great book, and really this was sort of the start of me taking sort of this journey to this place where I am now, whatever the word is for it, mindfulness, awareness, acceptance. It was called 10% Happier by Dan Harris. And, in this book, he talks about his own journey to mental health and meditation. He was the host of Nightline, and I think Good Morning America, and he had panic attacks on air, and he was just living such a stressed and just disingenuous life. Your subconscious will not let you do that for too long. It'll have you making bad choices, doing things that go against who you think you actually are. I don't want to say bad choices, it labels it, but and so I read this book, and it was profound, and he said he wanted to call it The Voice in My Head Is an Asshole. And I was like, oh my God, I totally love that. And I get it. And it really became my entree to meditation. Because it was like, I like that idea. It's like, look, it may not change your whole life, but it's going to make you 10% happier. And I went in and out of meditation for years and years and years, using all kinds of apps and things. And then I about 2 months ago got really serious with it again, where it's an absolutely, as a friend of mine described a non-negotiable for the day. And I do a minimum of a 20-minute sit every morning, sometimes twice a day. And it has really taught me how to meditation, as we discussed, is not about turning off your mind and clearing your head. It's about noticing when your mind is running away with thoughts, and then saying, oh, I'm not in this moment anymore. I'm way over here. I'm having this conversation, and you bring it back. And so what I've found is happening is there are moments when I would completely react to something and go far afield, that I'm not doing that anymore. And I think that it's very much the meditation that's helping me stay in that space. And I feel much calmer. Like I don't have the crushing self-doubt anymore. I'm not afraid of expressing myself. I have this weekly email that goes out, and, I didn't do it today, because I just didn't feel it. And in the past, I would be completely freaked out that I was skipping a week, and I would lose my whole audience, which is, it's like 7 people. So, whatever, but it's helped me stay, meditation has helped me stay aware. It's helped me stay in the moment that I'm in, and also just have a great deal of acceptance for, like, oh, I'm aware of the fact that I'm feeling sad right now. Well, that makes a lot of sense, because there's these things that are happening in my life. And then also, like, okay. And then I am not sad. There's this sense of feeling of sad that's happening in this moment. You notice it, and you continue on, and it'll do its thing, and you keep doing your thing. You don't have to become the sad. And I used to let it become me. And then as I describe it in the book, I would go dark, and it could last a week. It could last a month. It could last 6 months, as it off and on for my whole life. And and then at one point I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I do not want to go dark anymore. And you can't make that happen. It's a feeling that will just be like, okay, enough. And so, it's now, I don't think I'll go. I have tools and understanding of what going dark meant for me. And I can't say that I will never go dark again. I have moments now where I'll be cruising along for the day and I'll just feel like a sneaker wave, come from out of nowhere and crash down on top of me, and I'll feel my heart rate go up, and that might happen walking the dog. It doesn't have to be while I'm working or anything has to happen. But now I can just take a deep breath and say, oh, I felt that. And I can carry on, where it used to be I would beat myself up for that. I was a total failure for feeling that way. Or, I don't understand. And I had to understand everything. And I would try so hard to make sense of why I was feeling a certain way. And then if I understood it, I shouldn't feel that way. And why do I feel that way? And I would spin myself up for days.
When you talk about that in the book a lot, at times where you ask a lot of questions, right? And when you are at God's house and you are having a conversation with fate, with a capital F, you start going in this downward spiral almost of questions. So what I'm hearing you say is you now have tools. Meditation sounds like one of them. Getting this book out to the public. It has been another one, it sounds like.
I think that, what's interesting about the questions is I've come to understand that the questions were a mask also. And because I was uncomfortable with not knowing something or not understanding something. And I come from a family of degrees, PhDs and master's degrees. And I'm not that. I'm several degrees less. And so this was my way of being smart by asking these kinds of questions and understanding the mind and all of this. And so it was, the questions were a way to, I didn't know it, I didn't understand it, but they were a way to express my not enoughness. They made me feel smart. And I've had experiences where I've gotten messages that I have all the answers. And I took that to mean that when I asked a question, to trust myself with the answer. And what I've since discovered is it means that I don't have to ask questions.
That's awesome. So you drop a lot of F-bombs in the book, and I
haven't done any today.
You haven't, which is, I forgot I was going to start with a disclaimer.
No, there will not be any F-bombs in this recording,
in this podcast. Well, there are a lot of F-bombs in the book. You talk about sex and making love in the book. Do you want to talk at all about your relationship with Jess in the book, and your relationship with making love and that need, and the perfect day where it involved, sex and more sex and writing?
To be fair, it involved sex, great meals and conversations with friends, creativity, more sex. I've written that several times through my life, and there's actually an interview now with Keanu Reeves somewhere who basically says the same thing. He's like, wake up, have sex, go for a motorcycle ride, come home, have a good meal, have more sex. And it seems cooler when he says it. That guy is like, he's not of this world. I love that guy. I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. I think that I think my perfect day is probably a little bit different now. I think that it's just about connection and being in an authentic place with the people that are around you. I mean, one of the things that we talked about, yesterday is that, we are really good friends, and I think the amount of time we have spent communicating and actually face to face with one another in the last 8 years pales in comparison to others, and certainly over a lifetime. But the level of connection and the level of trust in those moments is a level of intimacy that it makes everything exponentially deeper and greater and whatever. You know, I could spend 10 hours with someone saying nothing and 5 minutes with you, and it'll just feel so much more rewarding. So I have done a lot of personal work around sex, and have uncovered a few things around what it meant to me. So I do think that's changed for me. But I think that's probably about as well as I can answer that question.
Fair. What stuck with me the most, I think, in that perfect day that you described, first of all, it made me think about what would my perfect day be like. And I think you even mentioned in the book that nobody else you knew could describe their perfect day, but yet you knew to a T what that looked like. But what stuck with me the most was you had mentioned that you had, sex with many women previously per se, but you had never made love.
Right.
And on that day, the connection, to your point, with Jess actually caused you to cry.
Right.
To the point where it was the first time you had ever made love to her, or any other woman for that matter. And where it came from. At this
point, we could say Eric. This is Eric. Me.
Fair enough. You mentioned, right? Not you, Eric. Fair enough. Thank you. That because of that connection, and it was, from what I remember, because Eric had not loved himself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, I have pushed a lot of people away in my life, especially people who loved me, because I didn't know, I felt like I was going to let them down, and I didn't believe that they could love me because I wasn't worthy of it. I didn't deserve it. I knew that I lied, and I wasn't living my authentic life. And so how could anybody love me for that? One of the hardest things for me actually was when I was sending books out to friends and signing them to people I had known my whole life. I just started sobbing. And because I just felt like, even though they now knew who I was, and and it's not that I had reconciled, but like I was showing them who I really was, and I wasn't living the masks anymore. I felt like I had cheated them and lied to them all these years. And also I had cheated myself from the relationship that I might have been able to have with these people, and even my closest friends at a deeper level. And I just couldn't stop crying. I was just sobbing. And I took a deep breath, and I realized what a gift it was to be able to have this moment now that was going to be pure, or at least more real. And there were going to be moments moving forward where I had that. And I felt really good about that. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard. One of the things that's still complicated for me is to be 56 and to feel like I finally, quote, get it, end quote, and not feel like I wasted decades. But you can't have this moment without all of those experience and those decades. And I recognize that. And so ego makes me think, oh, I have all this regret. And heart and love makes me say, what a gift to have this moment. And so and again, that's one of those times where in the past, I'd go dark on that. I wasted so much time. I fucked up.
You said there weren't going to be any
Damn it.
F-bombs. That's all right.
And so I would, and into the hole I go.
Well, so let's talk about that, because in the book, and I don't want to spoil the book for listeners, but there's a large portion that orients around regret and all of the regrets that you had in your life and all of the people that you hurt and or you regretted not doing something with those people, whether it's a creative element or an experience, right? Talk about your relationship with regret now and the idea that you and I have talked about. All we have is the present moment.
Yeah, I don't, my relationship with regret. I guess I have a really good relationship with regret because I don't have any necessarily regrets. I wrote once, I welcomed my demons with open arms and they didn't know what to do. And so I think that, the demons come to haunt you and you go, hey, welcome, brother, you're making peace with your shadow self or whatever, however you want to describe it. And your shadow and the demons go, oh, you finally realize that we're actually part of you and that, this is an important part. So I think that regret is similar in that it's a lesson for me to say, oh, I've seen this movie before and I didn't do this thing 5 years ago. And I wish that I had, and I regretted it for a while. And now it's like, oh, regret is a teacher. Fear is a teacher. Love is a teacher. Everything is a teacher. And I think if you come into it in that moment, you're like, oh, okay, all of this is about this particular moment. And, there's that old, what is it? You're as old as you've ever been. And how does it go? Today is the youngest you've ever been and the oldest you'll ever be, or the oldest you've ever been and the youngest you'll ever be.
Okay.
There it is. And so, that's all it is. It's just right now. And I think that, when I'm able to remember, and I do this really well, this happened a couple of years ago for the first time, summer of 2021. My family was in LA for the summer and I was on Melrose at like 7 a.m. with my dog going for a walk. And I had this sort of moment that it was a total miracle. And like I had this understanding all of a sudden downloaded to me that like that moment was the result of not only every decision and experience I ever had, but every decision and experience that everybody in that situation with me had ever had, and all of their people. And like there could 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, if someone had turned left at an intersection and gotten in a car accident, it might have taken out that person, which then, and they wouldn't be, I might not be here. It could have changed the whole course of human history, or my history, I should say. And I thought it was so profound to me how magical that felt. And then I thought, well, if that's the case, then this whole thing is like a big holodeck from Star Trek, which I'm not a big Star Trek guy, but like you go into the holodeck and you could create anything that you want, any experience. I want to be on a beach in Hawaii. And it's like, well, I can do that. If I want to be on a beach in Hawaii, I can make that happen. I can't just think it the way that the holodeck was, but I can start to manifest those things. And so I think that this comes back to this idea of regret. If you spend time in regret, you can't manifest those things because you're stuck back there instead of being right here.
Yeah. Well, it comes back down to, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but being in the present and perspective to a certain degree. But you touched on a couple things there that I also want to kind of unpack, and I don't want to forget coming back to the MDMA as well. But being on Melrose with your dog.
Mm.
So you talk a lot about Blondie and your relationship with Blondie in the book. And I have, as you know, a blonde, golden retriever at home and an amazing relationship with my dog. It just made me recognize and appreciate the power of that unconditional love.
Yeah.
And I love how you incorporate Blondie so much in that story. Is there anything you want to talk about there, or?
No, it is a powerful thing to have a relationship with an animal. It's it really is that unconditional. And your animal is, that pup is just awesome. For those that don't know, it has the world's largest and heaviest head.
He certainly does.
And he has to put it down on you at all times. And
by the way, I'm going to create a cocktail book.
Yes.
That is called "Are You My Headrest?" And I have taken pictures of Calvin resting his head in different locations on different things. And it's a takeoff on the child's book. I don't know if you remember, but we used to read this to our kids all the time. "Are you my mother?"
Oh, right. Yes, I remember that. That's really funny.
So anyway, that's another project, another day.
So I just, when I grew up, I had a giant German Shepherd. He was a 6 foot, 120-pound German Shepherd named Roy, ROI. And Roy was my guardian angel. I'm so grateful to my parents for having a dog that big as a kid, because I've never been afraid of dogs, and I love German Shepherds. I can't pass a German Shepherd, and it's always shocking to the owners because nobody wants to go pet a German Shepherd. They're all afraid of them. And I was like, "Can I pet your dog?" And they're like, "Really?" Like, yeah. And so I just, I know that Roy is somewhere running with my other dogs who have since gone on, Mutsy and Guinness and Harley. And, I know that they're doing their thing somewhere with all the other ones. And like that, it's such a magical thing that dogs bring to our lives and pets bring to our lives.
Well, I agree. And the part of the story when your dad, I believe, is carrying Blondie out of your home and loading Blondie into the backseat of the car. And it just broke my heart because I've been there personally. And
I cry every time I read that scene and any kind of signings and anything like that. It just wrecks me. Yeah. It's so vivid.
You talk about, ironically, Blondie being your guardian angel. And I'm not going to spoil the story with the guardian angel, but holy cow. Like, I kid you not, there was a moment in the book that I got goosebumps all over my arms. And again, I don't want to spoil the story, but is there truth to that portion of the story? Is there an element, again, I don't want to spoil the story, but there was this kid, right, with the backwards baseball cap.
Yeah, in Joshua Tree.
In Joshua Tree.
I don't, so I'm going to really back up now and talk about the genesis of the story and how it got there.
Okay.
So I started the book 25 years ago. And at the time I was dating, and maybe even longer now, but at the time I lived in California, Northern California. And I was dating someone who lived in Rochester, New York. And we were on the phone one night and she said, it's fate that brought us together. And I said, I'm going to drop another F-bomb. I said, well, fate must have a really fucked up sense of humor. And because you're there and I'm here. And then I said, well, I wonder if fate is God's court jester. I wonder if fate's job is to, put people together to entertain God, because God has this big, scary job. And so just stress relief. And then I was like, well, that's pretty mean if that's the case. But then I thought, well, I wonder if when you die, you get invited to dinner at God's house, and you get to meet fate and learn all the places where he, she, it, whatever intervened in your life. I was like, oh, that's a really cool story. So I wrote a draft of it, and it was terrible, fully fiction, and it was terrible. And I just couldn't quite figure out how to make it good. And so I kept coming back to it and kept coming back to it and kept coming back to it. And my wife one day, and I don't know if this is 10 years ago or 5 years ago, probably 10, said, well, why don't you make it nonfiction? And so that's when I started to write myself into the main character, and it took off.
Wow.
And I finished it. And I worked with writing coaches who were like, this is good. Let's start pitching it. Like, you're done. But Eric had an ending that Todd hadn't had, and it felt super disingenuous. And I thought, like, I really thought ahead, and I was like, well, what if I publish this and I'm in a book signing and someone asks me about the ending, and I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm still fighting depression every single day. I still want to die every single day. And that just felt like another lie. And so it wasn't until teeing you up, it wasn't until about 3.5 years ago that I found my ending. And then I went back into the book really deep and worked on it for another year or so, and came to where we are today.
I love the fate is God's court gesture, right? It's such a great visual that obviously is utilized in the book. And again, I won't go there for people who haven't read it yet, because it's such a great element. And just before we get to that 3.5 years ago, when we start to unpack that, I'll tell you.
You're doing a lot of unpacking.
I know. I feel like that's a required term on a podcast.
You might be right. You might be right.
I think it's required.
That's how you know you're doing a real podcast. You use the word unpack several times in the course of the interview.
All right. So I'll try not to use it again. But with that being said, you do an amazing job of referencing movies and scenes in movies and characters in movies, music as well, that, you know, you probably don't know this about me, but both my wife and I will watch a movie together, and 5 minutes after the movie is off, we've forgotten the entire storyline, who was in the movie, and we have just moved on to the next thing. So a lot of the references are pretty awesome, but bring back good memories. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I remember that from Field of Dreams, right? Type thing. Tons of baseball references. And so I love the writing style. It's really, really powerful and creates great visuals. So 3.5 years ago, MDMA.
Yeah.
What do you want to share about that, and what that has allowed you to do, or helped you, or just let's go there.
3.5 years ago, so it was May of 2021. So it was before my trip to Melrose. And I was going to LA with my son, because my brother and one of his boys, he has 3, were going to be down in LA visiting my dad first in Palm Desert, and then my mom in Southern California. And on the flight down, I told my son, I said, you know what, I'd struggled with my relationship with my parents over the years. And I was like, you know what, I'm really going to get along with my mom and my dad separately, and I'm going to be great. And like, I've done all this work, and I'm ready to like just move on and like have a good relationship with everybody and be at peace. And we went out and visited my dad first, and it was okay. I could feel that I was still kind of on edge and not really relaxed, and I wasn't being as truthful with my feelings as I wanted to be. And then we got to my mom's house, and I walked in the front door and saw my mom and felt my whole body grip. And I treated her as poorly over the next 72 hours as I had ever treated anyone in my entire life. And I felt terrible. And I went, as we were flying home, I said to my son, I'm like, wow, that did not go the way I thought. And he's like, yeah, what happened? And I was like, I don't know. And so I started doing some research on trauma, and I was like, something happened to me in my childhood. I don't know what. There's something unconscious inside me. Like, I just don't want to feel this way anymore. I don't want to treat my mom like this anymore. I don't want to treat myself or anybody else like this anymore. Something is not right. And a friend of mine sent me an article about MDMA therapy, and I had never really done drugs, and I really, especially psychedelics, and I hadn't done anything. I'd never done mushrooms or never done cocaine. Obviously not a psychedelic. Never done anything, and I just, it freaked me out, just the idea of it. But as I read more about it, I was like, this is amazing. I think I want to do this. So I applied for some test case thing. They were doing a lot of studies on PTSD, especially for the military. And I applied for some of those studies, but I didn't think that I had PTSD. I didn't think that I had any trauma. I just didn't understand why I felt this way. And long story short, my friend sat with me, and I did an MDMA session sort of by myself. Put on my eye shades and listened to music, and got this message that I needed to forgive myself. And I remember vividly that I said, in the midst of the sort of the session, I was having a conversation in my head, and I was like, I feel like this is my one chance. Like, I've got to figure this out. Why can't I figure this out? I've forgiven my mom. I've forgiven my dad. I've forgiven all of these things. And this little 7-year-old voice says, well, you have to forgive yourself. And I just started sobbing. And the thing about MDMA is that you're still kind of there, even though you're off. And so I took my headphones off, and I ripped the eye shades off, and I looked at my friend and I said, it's me I have to forgive. Oh my God, it's me. And he just kind of nodded, like, cause he'd done this, and he's like, yeah. And I just wrote down, I forgive myself. I forgive myself. I forgive myself. I forgive myself. And I'm sobbing, and I put my eye shades back on, and I put the music back on, and I, in my head, I turned to the 7-year-old boy, and I'm like, well, what do I do now? And he said, well, now you get to love yourself. And I pulled the thing, and I'm like, oh my God, now I get to love myself. And I wrote, forgive myself. I love myself. I forgive myself. I love myself. And then I put the thing back on, and I said, well, what now? And he goes, now we get to grow up. Mm. And everything made sense. All the times that I was faced with these situations, that I would become that scared 7-year-old boy instead of staying in my adult self, and responding from that scared kid's position and making choices for a scared kid, instead of me taking care of that scared kid by making an adult decision that basically let that kid know that he was okay. And it was super amazing. I felt like I had this whole new operating system downloaded into me. And that was on a Friday, and on Sunday flew home, and it's actually Mother's Day. Flew home on May 7th. And as we landed in Oakland, I texted my friends, and I said, the two people that were sort of supporting me, and I said, holy shit, like, I feel like I have a whole new operating system. It felt like, do you remember the first time you ever watched a big screen HD TV, and it just felt uncomfortable? It was like all so real and
Sure.
also clear. That's what everything felt like to me. I felt like I was given a decoder ring to the universe. And I was like, but I have this whole new operating system, but my whole world still operates in the old operating system. What do I do? And they wrote, oh, that's called integration. And I was like, what? I wrote back, what the F is integration? See,
you taught yourself. Nice work.
I did. That's not what it said. And I said, what the F is integration? And then I started really needing some help to figure out how to integrate that. And it took, because you think that when you have this experience that you understand it now, like everything's changed. And really what that does is it just opens the door to the starting line. And it introduces you to the begin. Like now you can move forward with this new understanding. You're not at the finish line. Like you've now finally unlocked a door that you need to go. So now, okay, what does it look like if I actually forgive myself? How do I operate? How do I show up? How do these conversations happen? And then, how do I trust myself, which is a part of the book too? Like, how do I trust myself to say the things I need to say without being afraid that they're going to hurt someone's feelings? And which is a huge part of what I got stuck in all these years. And that for like 2 years, that's what I worked on, trying to integrate that and get more and more present and more accepting and putting away more and more masks. But I still had a lot. And after 2 years, I started feeling a lot of the old feelings, a lot of the dark feelings coming back, and so I knew that there was still more work to do and different kind of work to do. And so for the last year, which coincides with, rewriting and launching the book, I've been doing different work and I really do think have finally kind of unlocked a lot of the hardest places to unlock. And I have much more understanding and acceptance and acknowledgement for the ebb and flow of life and what it means to be human, and very peaceful. Like I just am this is a good time.
Yeah.
This is a good time, which is a great time to feel this way with a kid leaving and the nest about to empty and all of that. It's like, this could be a really hard time, but instead it's a hard time. And I'm excited for this next chapter. I actually think the next book, I really don't feel like this is a new chapter. I feel like there's a book that's ending and I get to start a whole new blank book, which is pretty cool.
It's very cool. Very, very cool. And thank you for sharing that, 3.5 years ago and what transpired, that from the onset, it was you.
Yeah, always.
Right. And you mentioned that you forgave these other people.
Yeah.
But you hadn't forgiven yourself.
Yeah.
And your relationship with yourself, your relationship with regret, your relationship with fear, your relationship with not being good enough, your relationship with worry, your relationship with guilt, your relationship with all these things that are all stories in your head.
Yeah.
That come out in the book, by the way,
Yeah.
right? So I'm not just saying this, but you talk about these relationships in the book a lot. And I think that what I'm hearing you say, what I'm actually seeing, right, or our listeners can't see you right now, but what I'm seeing is this sense of relief. And you look great.
Yeah.
Right? You physically look great from the standpoint that you are in such a better place with yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, I've come to grips with the idea that even forgiving myself, forgiving a 7-year-old who had an experience that then changed the way that he became an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, 11, 12. Even coming to grips with the fact that like a 7-year-old, the 7-year-old doesn't need to forgive himself. He doesn't know enough to have to. So even being able to look at these old situations through the 7-year-old eyes again and being able to go, oh, dude, you didn't know enough to, like, you were put in an impossible situation. And, I love you for getting through it. And then just learning how to not have to learning how to go back and reparent the 7-year-old, reparent the 8-year-old, the 9-year-old, the 10-year-old, and staying in my adult body and mindset and space and the moment, and being able to notice when I'm being pulled back into that place because there's something in this scene that feels a little scary. And instead of saying, oh, that's scary, being able to say, oh, I understand, it doesn't have to be scary, and be like, I'm here now. It's okay. We're okay. That's not a scary thing. I understand why it feels scary and whatever, but that's not now. That's something you're feeling fear of, 50 years ago, not really fear right now. Right now, that's not a scary thing. And so let's sit in the discomfort and let it do its thing and move through me, and off it'll go. And learning how to sit with discomfort was really hard, because I didn't want to do that. I wanted to analyze it and figure out why it was there and answer the question about why it was there, and then say, I dilute you because I know why you're there. And it just wanted to be felt. It wanted to be seen because it was part of me, right? So I kept pushing everything. I kept pushing everything away, instead of just going, oh, I'm noticing that feels kind of scary. Okay. As opposed to, I'm noticing that that's scary. I'm going to figure out why and push it away and try to make you go away because I'm smarter than you. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome stuff. Congratulations again. I have truly enjoyed reading the book. I've enjoyed this conversation. Looking forward to what's next. There's so many other elements of the book that
There's no next, man. There's just right now.
There is just right now. Thank you for bringing me back to that. But with that being said, there's so many other elements of the book that I really enjoy. The visuals of the gym. If that bar actually exists, I'd love to check it out someday.
Yeah.
And the idea that the coasters were there to protect the glasses and not the bar itself. Like, there's just some things that your writing style, again, really is impressive.
I appreciate that.
And I again, thank you for giving this gift to us. And I had a CEO once before, Steve Jacobson at a prior mortgage company, that said, if it helps one person, then it's worth it.
I believe that. And I early on would practice my response to bad reviews. And what was interesting is that it was easier for me to respond or not respond to a bad review than it was to accept the validation of a good review. So if someone said, oh, it was so good, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. If someone said it sucks, I'd be like, well, yeah, I understand why you think that. And so I really appreciate that. I appreciate anybody that reads it. I appreciate anybody that it helps. I do think that there are people that, I keep saying that I want to get the book into the hands of the people who need the message in their hearts. And that's still very true. And for me, one of the greatest things when somebody says, oh, I bought a copy for my so-and-so. And I'm like, I just think that's such a compliment.
Well, we don't have time to go where you just went, but trust, forgiveness, and love.
Yeah.
And yet what you just said was, I bought, as an example, I bought this book for so-and-so because you think they need it.
Right.
But what we just talked about yesterday was about, it's not about them, it's about you.
That's right.
So buy the book for yourself.
Yeah.
Buy the book for yourself, read the book for yourself, and reflect upon the world, the trust, love, forgiveness, and those around you will then feel that and sense that and get that from you, and stop trying to change other people.
Yeah. Well, there's truth in that. I do think that, there's two, I could unpack that too. Giving someone a book isn't necessarily trying to change them as much as it is maybe understanding them and saying like, hey, I really see you. And I feel like this might speak to, I read this, it spoke to me. It might speak to you. Maybe it doesn't. But I really, when I get a book in the mail from somebody randomly, I feel it. I love that, because it's like, wow, that person ideally understands who I am and what I'm all about. And like, you get a link from someone for an article. I really enjoyed this article. I think it'll resonate with you. Like, that also shows that's less about trying to change them as it is, for me anyway, about I see you. And I see you and I love you, and maybe this resonates with you, maybe it doesn't, but I wanted to gift this to you in case it does.
Fair enough. So I absolutely understand what you're saying. Buy the book for someone, buy the book for yourself.
That's right.
Download it on Audible and listen to it. I've done both, and
Set
I
it on
think
fire if you're cold, whatever it takes.
whatever it takes. But Todd, this is awesome. And anything else that you want people to hear or know as we wrap up, or anything you
Yeah,
want to share?
man, it's available on Amazon.com.
Okay.
And a bunch of other places, but that's really the spot. You can find me on Instagram at A Day Well Lived. I'm on all the other social channels, Todd Lieman, Lieman. And I love this stuff. I just do. So I really appreciate you having me on, man. This has been a treat. And if one person listens, I'll be stoked.
Well, hopefully we'll get a
Also,
couple
I
more.
love you, Mom, because I know you will listen. So
No, well, that's very sweet, especially everything that you, I know, have shared with me and talked about in the book, and your relationship with your mom.
yeah.
So that's
And
awesome.
your dad, not to be left out.
Yeah,
And
your
you,
dad
Daniel.
and your brother. But yeah, with all that, I appreciate you. I appreciate your story, and appreciate you sharing about your journey over the last 3.5 years, and what that's done for you. And I know that you've battled depression, right? At the end of the day, we don't need to go backwards and talk about that now, but
No.
that I'm grateful for our relationship, and really grateful for you coming out to Colorado. You talk about Colorado so much in the book, and your love for Colorado. So it's just, in a way, fate that brought you here today to Colorado to allow us to be able to do this. So
Totally.
isn't that awesome?
Thank you, man.
Thank you.